Hello and welcome to Pro Wrestling 101. I am your co-host, JP John Poz, and of course, the star of the show, the former ECW World Heavyweight Champion, the former ECW Tag Team Champion, of course, the multiple time WWF Hardcore Champion. He is, of course, PJ Polacco, just incredible. Justin, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, my friend?
I am doing very good. Can't
Good.
complain. Can't complain at
Good.
all. Nobody would listen, but that's
No, they never do.
kind of kind of the way it goes in this world.
Yes.
So
Yes.
really, in the show, I feel like with you, you are a wealth of knowledge. You have so much stuff going on, and there's so much wrestling knowledge that you have. When you think of pro wrestling, just think of now. How much different is it than when you started? Because it's funny, like you always like pro wrestling. In my mind, it's like, oh, great stuff, great stuff. And then now it's almost like a chore to get through the shows. I mean, am I wrong on that?
No, you're not wrong. I think the biggest problem is if you see it once, you're going to see it, many times over in the show. I think there's a lack of diversity in the product. And pretty much one match kind of is the rest of the matches. And it's not just on Raw or SmackDown, it's on AEW, it's everywhere. You're going to see 10, 15-minute matches with, the same moves, a ton of kicks, a ton of chops, a ton of flips. And it's all really, become that. Whereas back in the day, you really, 15, 20 years ago, even you had distinct characters, distinct styles. You had the big man, which really is something. I mean, you have Braun Strowman and so forth, but like you'd have your big shows, and even back your big John Studs and Andre the Giants, and just Bam Bam Bigelow's. You'd have just a diverse, pool of talent that isn't really seen as much anymore, and also different characters, where now you just everybody just seems, besides like maybe the Fiend and a couple of others, you just really see wrestlers with they just put their names out there and that's who they are. It's more of an offshoot on who they are as people than characters.
Now, tell me about this because like you're going to see one move, you're going to see 1,000 times. Should these guys, and did you guys used to watch the monitors, know what the other guy
Yes.
was going to do, not copy? How did it change so much where you see the move in match 1, 3, 5, main event? And back then when you guys did it, you hardly ever saw the same move a few times. I mean, maybe it would happen, but it would be kind of more rare than it is today.
I honestly think it's because we would do less back then. So I think we had, you really, you could pick 3 or 4 things that you kind of knew no one was going to do, or, like, not everybody did a DDT or a pile driver, or, something big like a drop kick off the top rope, or, superplex off the top rope. Now it seems almost like a superplex is no more than a power slam or something like
Mhm.
that, where you see them quite often. Where back then I think you had a lot more to choose from because we were doing less, and now the first 5 to 6, 7 minutes of a match you see amazing amounts of moves. So yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, Seth Rollins actually uses the top rope suplex and then doesn't even pin the guy, then gives him the Falcon
Mhm.
Arrow, then the
Yeah,
guy kicks out. So that means you're killing
yeah.
2 moves, right? 2
Yeah.
finishes kind of right there.
And another thing that I see people doing a lot of, for example, is the sling blade, which I
Mm.
know Finn Balor uses it, Seth Rollins uses it, many other people use it, and it's become just a transitional high spot move. Whereas a couple of years ago, even by himself, it was used a little differently. So I just think we're in a phase where we're just throwing everything out there except the kitchen sink, and I think we're just going for more wow factor than telling stories and making sense of it's more of a exposition of moves than a pro wrestling match, which means you're trying to win and you're trying to tell a story through the moves that you do.
Yeah, I feel like they see, Hiroshi Tanahashi do the sling blade and they think they're going to steal it, but they don't know how to use it quite in the same way that
Yeah.
he would use it in Japan. So I mean it's a lot of I don't know, stealing of the moves, but not knowing right where to put them and how to put them in the match.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, look, Shawn Michaels with the super kick. You got hit by
Mhm.
that. You see how many super kicks in a show these days. You could
Yeah.
probably count 10 or 15. But when Shawn Michaels did it, that was it. When Jake Roberts hit the DDT, that was it. And so on. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think, I don't know whose fault that is. I just think it's the progression of where things are going, because I think we've hit a point now, too, where how many moves are really left? If you really think about all the amazing things that are done out there, it's like, how much more could people do? How many more times are you going to flip? How many more, you know what I mean? How many different ways you do a move, you know what I mean? Because essentially it all boils down to it being the same. So I think we need to dial it back a little bit, because this was always the old timers' belief. Even when I was frustrated trying to do more moves and trying to kind of be that guy where I was trying to get more and more stuff in, they would explain to you, you're going to eventually end up killing it off, because, they're going to keep wanting more. And they're like anything else, you're going to keep wanting to set the bar higher. But there's only so high you can get it to where then, you're going to reach a period where you're going to get stuck. You're giving fans too much. And that in turn, that really takes away from the specialty of a move, like a diamond cutter, or even something like Randy Orton's RKO. Still, if hit out of nowhere the way it was meant to be, it's still something that pops the crowd as much, if not more, than a big move off the top rope, or something, huge on the floor, or something big on, those apron bumps that, these guys and gals are taking these days. So I think we just got to kind of figure out where we want to go and where we're headed as far as telling stories in the ring.
Yeah, I feel like, man, it's just so much that they try to put it into one match, and so many things. That old expression, "Get my shit in." I mean, they
Yeah.
really, right? I mean, when they were
Yeah.
going over the match in the back or somewhere, they literally saying to each other, "Let's throw everything we can out there in 12 to 15 minutes."
I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't have an idea how these guys do it today. But it sure feels like it. And again, I think they're doing themselves a disservice, because it is all starting to look like the same car crash, at least for me. Every viewer is different, and there's some people that are viewers, fans that are really happy with what they're getting, But for somebody like myself, who's been involved in wrestling for 30 years and has been a fan much longer than that, I kind of see it, a little differently. And again, some of the most over moves in history, the leg drop, the people's elbow,
Right.
stuff like that. The stunner. Those weren't these huge, huge moves. It was the context in which they were used, and I think that's important. And I think we need to realize that moves are just a way to tell the story. It's not the story. And that's kind of how I feel like they're telling moves, or they're telling stories with only their moves. So that's why it seems so repetitive, and it seems like it all kind of looks the same. Whereas you should be, telling a story, and the moves just help you get there, not necessarily that is the story, you know.
Yep. How do they kinda, like, go about it? Like, obviously, you guys would either watch the monitor or, you discuss it like, "Hey, I'm doing this move, this move's off limits." I've known a promoter that used to say that, "Hey, there's no hitting the ref," so he'd ban ref bumps, and unless,
Sure,
one guy was gonna do it for the whole night, he'd ban it for the rest of the people.
sure.
He'd say, only one person hits, the RKO, whoever's finisher was in the
Yep.
indie league, only that one person. Is it the promoter saying it? Is it the booker? I mean, who's the one that could say, or the wrestlers just police themselves and say, "Hey, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that."
Usually it happens in two cases. Usually the wrestlers police themselves, but there have been times where, and I remember this vividly, when Shawn was really starting to get his big push to beat Brett for the title. You would see it on every sheet. They put up a sheet with the matches and
Mhm.
the lineup. You would see it on every single one for months. No super kicks, no super kicks, no super kicks, and it was very much, they were trying to establish that. So it can go both ways. It really goes both ways. But right now, I think it's more or less, even what did I see recently? I saw the Young Bucks do a double V trigger,
Hmm.
And I mean, I know they probably don't see that as anything wrong, but again, that's something, even the name is something that is synonymous with Kenny Omega. It just starts to blur the line of, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yep.
what are we doing here? So they got to be a little cautious of how they move forward, because again, I think they really take it, because then when finally your hero or your villain hits that move, it's not going to give it the effect you would hope to give it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, okay, they do a double V trigger. He does a V trigger, but he didn't finish anybody with it. It's the
Right.
setup move, and I don't know. It gets too much like that's their buddy too. It's like, shouldn't we
Yeah.
not use his move? Like, I don't know. It's like there's some disconnect there with the wrestler
Yeah, I
stealing
think they don't.
everybody's move.
I don't think they think that way. I
Hmm.
really don't think they think that way. I think they just, they figure they just go out there and do what feels right. And who knows? I mean, maybe that's the way they want it, and that's okay. But I don't know. I just find it that it does them a disservice. And you said it too on. I think you said Seth Rollins not getting a cover. Man, if you listen to Jim Ross on AEW commentary, he's always on those guys where it's
Yeah.
like they should be
Yep.
going for a cover here. They're not hooking the leg. And again, he's trying to help tell the story by the moves that you're giving him, because again, we're trying to tell a story. Both commentators and the guys and gals in the ring. And the story is we're supposed to be out here to win these matches. That's the difference between a brawl. When you have a blood feud, they don't care about the covers. They're just out there to try to hurt one another. And it's stuff that the difference maker really are those subtleties, because if you're out there trying to win and you hit a move from the top rope and you're not going to cover, it's like, do you have to hit your finish? You know what I mean? For you to go for a cover and try to win. I mean, I think who won with the backslide recently?
McIntyre over Randy Orton.
Yeah, and I got a lot of mixed feelings about that. But the reason they did stuff like that, and it worked for me, is because when was the last time you saw somebody get beat with a backslide?
Yeah, that's
You know
why I
what I
liked
mean?
it. Yep.
And I think sometimes you need to do stuff like that to kind of reset the bar, to let fans know, well, hey, maybe this can happen. It makes the wrestlers' jobs a little easier. You know what I mean? Because this way, small packages will mean something. Those little things mean something, because false finishes have gotten to the point, and this has been well over a decade. You know very well that if you don't hit your finishing move or a certain succession of moves, that no matter how impressive that big superplex looks off the top rope, there's not, regardless if you barely kick out, it's not going to matter, because you're not going to get the win. And I
Yep.
think bookers and people that write the shows and whatever you call them these days, that put matches together and finishes together, they're going to have to start throwing things like that into the mix to sort of shake it up a bit, and to get fans thinking once again that things can happen at any time.
And I think Jim Ross, for whatever reason, I always laugh. Him and Shivani sometimes are the best part of the show if you
Oh
really
yeah,
listen and focus in, because they're kind of ripping the guys a little bit, but
yeah,
they make sense. They're almost speaking like I would speak, like, "Why didn't you make the cover there? What the hell
yeah,
was that?" Like they're
right.
they're natural, real, no Vince in their ear, natural ear, reaction, right? I mean, they're really telling you what it
Yeah.
is. Sometimes it's funny as hell, like Jim Ross
Oh,
ripping
it
on the
is.
guys. Yeah.
It is. I mean, if you're watching, basketball, NBA on TNT, which I do often, you'll get some of the older veteran players. Some young kid will make a mistake, and they'll be like, what are you doing? You can't do that, and whatever.
Yep.
And I think it's no different in pro wrestling too, because at the end of the day, the guys calling the action are kind of left with a pile of shit sometimes that they got to try to make sense of. So,
Yep.
so hopefully, I mean, when they figure that out, and I don't think they do, and that's what concerns me, is I think there's a real lack of systemic leadership in a lot of these places. Not so much the WWE, but they're very guilty of it, because I think they have too many cooks in the kitchen as
Mhm.
far as writers and stuff. But in AEW, I feel like they just don't have enough leadership.
Yep.
To kind of tame what they're putting out there, because like I said, I review the show every week since it's been on the air, and it's challenging sometimes. I mean, I have to go on, to be honest, I'll watch it live, start to lose my train of thought, and have to go back on literally the time right before I go on air to kind of have any kind of idea, because I won't even know what I put down in my notes, because it does all seem very much like it's 2 hours of the same stuff with not enough variety for me, at least.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely. Yep, and obviously, Russo, Vince Russo's Patreon,
Yeah.
patreon.com, Russo TWC. Got to throw that out there. Of
Yeah.
course, we're part of
Absolutely.
the Vince Russo brand here on his Pyro and Ballyhoo YouTube channel. Of course, got to mention
Absolutely.
that.
Yep.
But it's so funny. Like when you like look at Jim Ross calling it like it isn't, calling it for real, or like seeing something, and the viewer at home, especially an educated viewers, seeing some of this stuff, and they're like questioning it. It's just like, man, I'm glad like Jim Ross isn't being like just a shill and saying, oh, this is great, that is great, like the WWE announcers do. So I don't know, I
Right.
like the honesty out of Shivani and Ross for sure. And even Taz sometimes
Yeah.
throws out some like little quips that are pretty
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, I think so too. And again, they're putting out their expertise. But well, let me ask you this. Let me throw it back at you. You as we both are pro wrestling fans, is there anything you would like to see changed? I'm curious.
Man, I thought AEW was going to be more like realistic as they were pushing like the real pro wrestling. I
Right.
love the larger than life characters. Like Reigns just came back. I always liked him just because he looks like a star,
Yeah.
looks like a professional wrestler. If I saw Reigns walking down the street, I'd be like, okay, let's walk over here. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that Vader factor. Like this guy,
Yep.
he kicked the shit out of me, or just the look. Okay, guy looks like a movie star, but he looks tough as shit. He must be a pro wrestler. I like that look. Like that appeal. AEW went too crazy on the small guys. Now they're trying to bring it back. Get some big guys. I like the Brody Lees and the Jack Swaggers of the world. I feel like you need some meat in there, some big guys. I like the stiff style, but when these small guys are doing it, it's not as believable to me. I think acrobatics in maybe match one or match two is fine, but you can't have acrobatics through it all. It's like the WCW was on a roll. They had like a little bit of mix of luchadors, a little bit of mix of technicals.
Yeah.
You had Hogan or something in the main event. I mean, everything was so completely different. I kind of like the difference, but I want it to seem real or be real. I don't want stupid storylines like this Moxley MJF
Yeah.
thing with the lawyer. It's so
Yeah.
corny. Like I feel like
Yeah.
what is this 1987? You're trying to trick a little kid like that.
Yeah.
What I mean? That was weak. I need stronger storylines, better storytelling, more consistency, and I don't need like AEW is 45 guys on the show. Let's
Right.
let's set a roster. Let's focus in on the guys. Get
Yeah.
FTR on there every week. I don't want to see them on Dark. Get them on the show every week. Get Tully Blanchard on the show every week. Do something and build with a good storyline. I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but
No, no,
there's so
that's
many things that I feel like it's just missing out there. And they just throw out these long ass 15-minute matches. That's not what TV is for. The
no.
pay per view, you can have the 15-minute matches. These and they wonder why people are flicking and switching the channels because they know, okay, this match is going to go
Right.
20 minutes. I'll come back. Oh, it's still on. I'm
It's
going to go
still
back.
on.
Yeah,
Well, the
I know
thing is,
so much.
what's at stake? I mean, what am I getting when I buy the pay per view? Are they going to go 30 minutes? You know what I mean? There's only so much
Yeah.
you could give them, and there's only so much wrestling. I mean, fans. We're at an era now where there's, the kids, especially younger kids, attention span are so much shorter. That's why like YouTube videos, average people that watch YouTube videos like 2, 3, 4 minutes,
Hmm.
and we're giving, 15, 16 minute segments to start the show. It's challenging, but a funny thing is, and my wife, we, since my son got surgery on his leg, he's been sleeping on the couch, just works better, right? So he's taken over that TV. So my wife and I at night for, nightly TV watching, will be in the bedroom watching television. And when I watch AEW, poor girl gets stuck watching it with me. But it's funny to hear from somebody that's not a fan or not accustomed to watching wrestling today. There was something with, and this isn't a review show, this is just going back to characters and kind of looks and the whole perception.
Hmm.
You'll see where I'm getting at. Darby Allin had a big brawl, a big fight that started in the ring with I think the kid's name is Ricky Starks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it. It looked like they were going at it and all that. But she said to me, she goes, "What is this?" I said, "Oh, it's I gave them the names." And she goes, "It looks like two of Nick's friends. Nick is my 20-year-old college student.
Yeah.
Like two of his
Yeah.
buddies, like fighting on the lawn." It doesn't look like, even UFC fighters, man, they just look a certain part. They look like animals that are ready to fight. And these guys to me just look like they just don't, as cool as Darby Allin is, he's got a great look. does some great stuff. It's just they don't have that thing, that star quality. Vince says it all the time too, like what you were saying. You know, you're in an airport, you're not going to recognize Darby Allin unless
No.
you're a hardcore fan. You're not going to look twice.
Right.
You know, or a guy like Ricky Starks. If you see a Lance Hoyt or a
Oh
Brody
my.
Lee or a
Yep.
Roman Reigns
Hmm.
or, you know, a Seth Rollins, even, they have a certain look. They look like men's men. They don't look like you know, and you know, they certainly don't look like, you know, 150-pound soaking wet, you know, 20-something-year-olds. They look like professional athletes. And I think that's, you know, that's a bit of a, especially for pro wrestling. Like, I think pro wrestling has always been larger than life, gladiators. And, you know, when you see the Young Bucks, as talented as they are, and you see guys like Allen and Ricky Starks and others, they just don't give me that. Even, look, even when Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, right? I remember, like, only because we've been talking about them and they are on the AEW show,
Hmm.
they were the smaller guys,
Yep.
right? They were smaller professional wrestlers. And I remember the first time I went to see a show for WWF, I was a kid, and I happened to be by the aisleway, and I saw them when they came out, and they were mountains of men. They were still, I mean, Arn Anderson had thighs the size of my entire torso. It felt like he
Yeah.
was just a
Yep.
big, imposing man. And even though he, you know, even Tully Blanchard, they weren't bodybuilders by any stretch. But if you saw them in a bar, you could tell that they would kick your ass. I mean, they were
Hmm.
big, imposing men, and that's what I think wrestling is missing is that thing where, you know, even though they may not be bodybuilders, they're just tough guys. You know what I mean? They might have a
Yep.
little bit of a beer gut, you know, but they're built and they're strong and they're mean and they're nasty. And I think we need to kind of, you know, you don't want it all to be that way. It can't all go retro, but they have to find the balance of, like you said, guys that may be a little quicker, a little faster, but not have 75% of the roster be that. Like, really have a little bit of everything, because that's what pro wrestling used to be. Is you have some colorful characters, you have some big gigantic men, you have your high flyers, your luchadors, if you will. You have all types, and I think they really much should diversify in, like, you know, in their talent pool. And then they got guys like Scorpio Sky, who to me is a perfect example of what a today's wrestler should be. He's 6'2", 6'3". He's got a hell of a physique, 230 pounds, could wrestle, could fly, could entertain you in many ways, could talk. You know, he's a good-looking guy. That's what I think a pro wrestler should be, and he's somebody that I find that they don't use, and that guy is somebody really without much of a character, other than he's in, you know, SCU. They really haven't dove deep into what SCU really even means.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I find that they really need to, and a lot of people, WWE does too, of just peeling it back and start to say, look, this, everybody has a certain role, and then create their characters from there. Because other than MJF, I don't see a heel in a lot of wrestling. I mean, he's like a real throwback to me of what a classic wrestling scumbag heel is,
Yep.
especially because he is that punk kid. And
Yep.
he is as advertised, because he's not that bad in real life, but I could see how he's pretentious. I mean, I love him personally, but he's a pretentious kid, and he lives that gimmick, and he plays it to precision. So I think we need to see a little bit more of people taking a character and trying to go with it however they feel. You know, we don't have too much of that, you
Yeah.
know, these
Now,
days.
like Arn and Tully, not necessarily like the biggest guys, but the way they carry themselves, their
Yes.
look. I mean, everything about them screams like these guys are pros, tough guys. They get the job done. Like you fall in love with them. You know what I mean? Like those kind of guys. MJF has that ability too, where you fall in love with hating him. You know what I mean? The guy you hate or love to
Yep.
hate, like that kind of guy. Great character. He's one of the only guys they've actually done well with. But I've heard that it's mostly him doing it
Yeah.
himself, creating his
Yeah.
own character. So
Yeah.
when you are like creating a character and putting together a character, is it mostly from within? Is it mostly like MJF? Is it him himself who's creating, or do you have a collaboration with the booker and the owner and whoever else?
It used to be both extremes. It used to be in the WWF, and I mean WWF because of time period. When I was there in the mid '90s, the Aldo years, It was
Mhm.
really all them. You got to, of course, help paint the picture when you were performing the character, but it really was Vince was telling you what to say, what to do, and the writers. Steve Austin, who I've been on the podcast twice, tells a story about like how he snuck in certain things. Well, not live because Vince would kind of be there to direct or
Mhm.
kind of stop it. But on pre-taped shows, he would figure out what tapes he was going to be on that were pre-taped. He would try to circumvent and get some of that Stone Cold to come out when he was still the
Mhm.
ringmaster. Um, so I think it needs to be a marriage really between both the promoters and the bookers, whoever's booking the characters, and of course then the character themselves. Because I was always told that if the office isn't going to do it for you, you need to do it for you in the best way possible, whichever way you feel you want to take that character. And I think that in AEW more than WWE, they have that opportunity because they don't have as much of somebody down really down their throats. They have a lot more opportunity than where in WWE I feel that things are just written in for the Fiend and you know Drew McIntyre and so forth. But right now AEW really needs to just focus in on like who are these guys? Like I want to know who these guys are. Like the
Yeah. Yeah.
best friends, for example. I hate that gimmick. I
It's
hate that
horrible.
gimmick.
It's horrible. Yeah.
Trent, I like. I think he's a good wrestler. He looks good.
Yep.
But the
Looks great.
Chuck Taylor, man, I'm not digging him. There's a lot of stuff he does that looks goofy to me.
Yep.
I don't get the gimmick. I mean, I try. I get it. It's kind of goofy, but again, it's like is that really a gimmick? Doesn't really the
Mm.
fact that you guys are best friends and you hug.
Give me more.
Okay,
Right.
sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So you want more from the best friends. I mean, you got to give me more than them hugging and coming out of their mom's car. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just it's corny, and unfortunately they have too much of that stuff. They have too
Yeah.
much of that stuff, around. But hopefully, and that's the thing though. Unless there's somebody to tell them that the characters need to change, I don't think they're going to do it. Unless they usually is when you're not getting used that the fires are kind of burnt. You know what I mean? You start to get that the flames under you to really start to come out. Like when you're not being used, you get that, well, I got to do something. Like I think unfortunately there and in this society of wrestlers, they just kind of feel like, well, we're going to be on no matter what. Seems like they're all buddy systemed over there to where they're going to have their jobs, and until they get put in a situation where possibly they're not being used as much, that they're not going to come out with a character. you know
Yeah.
that's a big thing. I think they need to maybe get pulled down a couple of pegs to realize that, look, the office isn't going to write something for me. I better create some kind of a persona.
How much of that comes from, they said like coming from within, maybe you're not used. How much of that's like desperation? We're like, man, I gotta do something. I gotta get on TV. I want to make an impact. I want to, create this character. How much of that is like
A
almost
lot,
like
a lot of
desperation?
a lot of the best guys that have broken through has been that desperation. Steve Austin is the prime example. He was not meant to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. He really did, and he was one of the very best examples of that happening, because Vince McMahon, certainly, if it wasn't for him having the crowd uh, pop for him the way they did and really start to follow him at the house shows, and it was an amazing journey to see him uh, every week kind of build and get bigger, and the rumblings would get bigger, and you know, it, and I think those guys are the ones that usually will go harder and further in finding their voice. But then there's other guys who, you know, they're seen as the superstars. Matt Hardy is another one who wasn't being used
Yep.
properly in
Yep.
his mind's eye, and went out there and created all kinds of different things. And to today in wrestling, I mean, there's a unique thing with social media, with YouTube. The wrestlers have platforms today that they never had before to really try to break out of whatever they're in or not in, so I think that's important, and I don't think wrestlers do enough of it. I think Zack Ryder definitely did when he was there,
Mm, yep.
and got a little bit of a push, but he almost got got in trouble
Heat.
for
You
getting
got heat
over.
for it. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
stuff like that, man, is definitely, those are the people that really end up winning because they're truly from the people and of the people. And that's like a merger. That's when you hear what the fans are telling you, and then you could kind of add that into what you feel your character should be. So it's a perfect marriage between the fans and the character. And sometimes it's not stuff that you would expect or you would even plan for yourself, or something you didn't see. Sometimes it's something that just happens organically, and those seems to be the best and most successful ones.
Yeah, it feels like the organic guys definitely where it's not forced. Reigns
Sure.
for a while was definitely forced. They're trying
Yeah.
to get that character. John Cena felt forced for a very long time. Kind of sometimes can work against you. So let's just say I'll go back to the WWF 1994. Aldo Montoya, yourself, and,
Mhm.
and they're kind of creating this character. And we kind of bits and pieces we're talking about each week. So when Pat Patterson and Vince come up with this character, how much of that is you putting collaboration, or how much of that is them saying, "This is who it is. You're Aldo Montoya."
Since the character wasn't really a featured character, I mean, I wasn't by any means or stretch of the imagination going to be a top guy. I was a mid guy, introduced as a mid-level guy. It really was left to me to kind of, I knew I was supposed to be a baby face, so it became, well, what does that mean? What does Aldo Montoya as a babyface look like? And at the time, it was just, in wrestling, it was just, that white meat baby face. I saw myself wearing a mask. So right away, I thought I have to be fast. I have to do some flying moves. You know what I mean? I have
Yep.
to be a wrestler. So, and I didn't get a lot of microphone time. So I really was limited in what I could do. So it was at that point, it was just trying to just in my wrestling put out what the character was supposed to be, because I really didn't have much of a choice in those days of what you could do. So I was just a generic masked white meat babyface wrestler. But that's all I could do at the time. I
Who
didn't have
came up with
promo time.
Who
So,
came up with the mask?
Creative did. Creative came up with it, and it actually it looked nothing like that. It was originally the mask was supposed to have a cane kind of front, and
Really, that would have been
yeah,
cool. Yeah.
yeah, and the whole thing was kind of made out of a pleathery material with a little harder. It was definitely a harder mask, but the whole thing was they could not get it done on time because it was this little S&M spot they had in New York that were making those masks, and
Oh,
we
wow.
had to go in. Yeah, we had to go into this little leather shop to get this mask created, and they just couldn't pull it off in time. So the girls, the seamstresses, had to come up with the best they could with just cloth and a little bit of foam. And we know what that became. Not a
Yeah.
very good look of what originally could have been a lot different looking mask.
Did you
You
tell him
know.
it looked like a jockstrap? Looked like a yellow jockstrap?
I did not say a damn word. I did two things, nothing in like it.
Why not? You just didn't want to get in any trouble. Don't ruffle the
I,
feathers.
I just didn't want to rock the boat. I was kind of in no, thank you. I was in no situation to say anything, or I felt like I was in no position to say anything. It's so intimidating for a younger person in this business to say something, especially when you're just getting started. Because back then things were so different. You didn't want to piss off the higher ups. The guys, the boys. The top guys in the company in the locker room. You didn't want to piss off talent, relations, and the writers or Vince especially. So you had to just be very careful and tread softly.
So the Portuguese, we're kind of talking about it a little bit. Why
Yep.
Portuguese? They wanted to go into that market. They wanted to go into Portugal and Spain and all this other stuff. Is that what they were thinking?
Yeah, that was really it. The character itself was meant to go overseas because at the time it wasn't even so much Europe. They wanted to go to South America, and Brazil is 75% of South America.
Brazil, yep.
Huge country, and their main language is Portuguese.
Hmm.
So to really bring a Portuguese speaking character to this huge part of the globe was bringing up a guy that speaks Portuguese. And what also happened there that didn't really pan out, and a lot of people don't know this, is we never ended up going to Brazil. There was a whole, we had a whole bunch of television lined up there, and we had tours that were booked, and something fell through. Whatever connections that they had over there, I don't know if money was stolen or deals fell through, but between promoters and the television thing that we had set up there, that market fell through. But then there was no need for a Portuguese character. But then also, I was a good utility guy, and they liked me, and they liked,
Hmm.
they liked the potential of who I could be in the future. I stayed on for, another year and a half after all of that kind of fell through,
Yeah, I feel like Aldo was really from 94 to about June of 97. I mean, it's a pretty lengthy
Yeah.
run
Yeah.
with Aldo. Did you
Yeah.
think that at any point, like, okay, I'm going to get a push here, they're going to do something with the character, they're going to elevate? Like, what were your thoughts on Aldo as he's kind of moving on up the ranks?
Well, they certainly tried a couple of times. They did an angle with me. They did a couple of angles with me and Jerry Lawler. They had Jake Roberts manage me for a little while. They
Yep.
did that thing where Jake was in recovery, and they poured booze down his throat. Well, my throat first, and then
Yep.
his. They did a bunch of stuff. They also did a thing where I beat Jeff Jarrett in a non-title match for the IC title, and the following week, I did promos the second week, and the third week I got the actual title match and lost. So
Yep.
they did little things here and there sporadically, but there was really never anything. The fans really never had a reason to cheer for it. You know what I mean? The character looked goofy. There was really, other than the wrestling itself, there was no appeal to it. You know what I mean? And even though it was still very much a Saturday morning thing, and the character was very much a Saturday morning thing, it was, they were never going to get any real fan reaction from that guy.
So really, I mean, just incredible character. Obviously, great creation. You and Heyman. Is it easier to do that in ECW with Heyman, and almost impossible to do that with Vince at WWF? As far as like
Yeah.
wanting to get your character, it's Vince's way or the highway.
Yeah. It was very much, I was told very little really by Paul. I was given a name, and I was given, just be cocky, just be, this scumbag psychopath, like, you know what I mean? Just be that guy that, nobody could stand, that punk, you know
Yep.
what I mean? Just be that, and gave me the ball to kind of just go out there and do it. And if he didn't like something, he'd be like, not so much. Whereas if you did something that Vince didn't like, it would be a lot more impactful than Paul saying, well, that didn't really work. You know what I mean? There was a lot more at stake. Therefore, out of fear, you didn't do much of creating anything. You really held back, where when you went out there with ECW, it was balls to the wall, and you really could do anything you felt in here that could help you envision what Paul had for the character. Quite
So
easy, actually, comparative to the other experience.
So really, I mean, there's no creative freedom whatsoever in WWF. Really, with Stone Cold, I feel like because WCW was there and there was so much pressure, they were killing him. It was almost like Vince was like, "All right, I'm gonna let this guy little by little be Stone Cold." You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
it was Vince's desperation almost to let these guys, and even The Rock let him turn heel and become The Rock. You know what I mean? I feel like it's almost Vince's desperation because now he wouldn't turn range for 5 years. I mean, there's so
yeah,
many things that I feel like out of desperation, out of fear that said he's going to kill him in the ratings, that they have to try do something new. Is that also
yeah.
a key role in kind of putting a
It,
character together?
I think so too. It's also, of course, out of necessity is where
Yeah.
that all came from, and that's when, something needed to be done. And, if you didn't allow these guys to be creative, they were going to lose miserably, possibly, not have a company. So I think that the writing was certainly on the wall, and they had to do stuff. And there were a lot of people, creative forces within the company, the Shawn Michaels and, the Road Dogs and the Hunters started to kind of come to where they had a voice backstage with Vince. And really, they started to allow a very kind of, like we talked about earlier, an organic process of getting these guys over and really breaking the mold of what WWF used to do into kind of that attitude era. Like we got to try something hip. We got to try something different because times were certainly changing. And Vince really had his feet to the flame and had no choice but to kind of allow this to happen if he was going to be successful.
Right. I
You
feel
know.
like with a lot of those characters, it could be a little bit of luck, involved with the
Oh,
character,
it's
right?
always some of that. Yeah.
And it's almost timing too, because Steve Austin in the '90s wouldn't maybe work. Steve Austin in the '80s, he'd probably get booed out of the building. Steve
Yeah.
Austin in the '90s getting the biggest pop of all time. So timing, right? Right, plays a kind of a key role in the character as well.
Timing is everything, and that's something you're always told. I've heard that so many times throughout my career, out of frustration when I asked a lot of questions like, "What can I do?" To you'd ask veterans like, "What can I do?" And sometimes you would just be it's timing.
Yep.
It happened with me and with getting the Aldo gig. It was right place, right time. Portuguese guy that they were looking for. Then it happened with the ECW Just Incredible thing where they were not necessarily looking for a character like Just Incredible. Paul Heyman saw that in me, and then he's like, "Well, this guy has years and years of working live television, live Raw, live pay-per-views. We're going to become a television product and do pay-per-views and etc. So we need a guy that knows how to produce on television." Where back in the early days of television, hell, Balls Mahoney, Axl Rod, and those guys, they wouldn't even look to the TV cameras. They wouldn't even look to the hard cameras. They didn't know how
Right.
to position themselves. Where I had that ahead of them, which really benefited me in my success because a lot of those guys had no idea what how to be on television or live television and take cues and so forth.
That's something we'll definitely get into, as the weeks go on, because that is
Yeah,
such an
absolutely.
interesting thing. Working to the camera, how to be TV ready. I mean,
Yeah.
so many interesting things. I love that you can bring that to the table. You're still pretty young at that point in
Oh yeah.
ECW too. So I mean, you're advanced, way advanced
Yeah.
for your years.
I was 24 years old when I got to ECW. So, and I had already had all those years of
Yeah.
television time. So yeah, it really benefited me and helped me become, that guy for ECW. Totally.
Now, as far as the Aldo character, do you look back at it and say like, "Oh, it's jokey," or it's one of those things you look back at it and like it? Like just say Shane Douglas absolutely hates Dean Douglas, doesn't
Right.
want to talk about it. Tom Pritchard hates Zip, doesn't want to
Yeah.
talk about it. Are
Yeah. Yeah.
you that way with Aldo, or you're more like at peace with it?
Oh, I'm at peace with it. I always looked at it in a positive light. It gave me the opportunity to work for many years for the WWF to learn all those things that we just talked about, how to be on television, how to work, for the live crowd and pay-per-views and all that. And got to travel the world and really learn from some of the best, of the time. So, at 24 years old, I started my second character and second career in a different company, and I was ready from the moment I hit the ground in ECW. I was ready, which allowed me in that short time I was in ECW, probably close to 3 years, until they went out of business. Where it was my time.
Yeah,
It all helped.
absolutely. Now we'll wrap it up this week. I think it's just a great show kind of putting on here as my camera kind of went out there for a second. But as far as some plugs, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Two Man Power Trip. You can follow PJ on Twitter and Instagram at PJ Palaco. Check out our website, tmptempire.com. You can check out the Russo's brand.com. And of course, Vince Russo on YouTube as well. That is Pyro and Ballyhoo. PJ, please give us any plugs that I missed and anything you got coming up as far as virtual signings or whatever you got coming up.
Well, right now I'm pretty slow. I just do have my pro wrestling tees. Go check that out. ProWrestlingTees.com/Just Incredible. And just follow me on Twitter at PJ Palaco. I've been selling some items, some ECW memorabilia that I've had laying around. So check that out as well. And that's pretty much it right now, John.
Awesome stuff. Now we will let you do what you do and cut a great promo, kind of taking us out. But of course, awesome each here on every week, talking pro wrestling one on one with you, as we will delve deeper into your career and learn even more about the pro wrestling business. We'll get into some storytelling, some jobbing, some heels, some
Yes,
faces, knowing your place in the card, and kind of even staying in shape, getting paid, locker room etiquette. Putting together a
absolutely.
match, all these different things that we will learn each and every week here on the show. So please, PJ, take us out the only way you know how.
Well, guys, you know it. Two-man power trip and Pro Wrestling 101. We're not just the coolest and we're not just the best. Pro Wrestling 101, we are just incredible. See you next week.